Welcome to episode number 43 of the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. Not every story we tell can be about land management. Today, we're taking a long flight to Siberia with National Land President Aaron Graham to hunt a bear. Aaron Graham has captained a national champion college football team, played in the NFL, and co-founded one of the most successful land companies in the United States. He also took the trip of a lifetime, escaped death, and hunted Siberian brown bear. For those listeners who enjoy tales of hunting, we're about to go on one heck of an adventure. Now sit back and enjoy. All right, I am sitting with Aaron Graham. Aaron Graham is the president of National Land. It's the umbrella company for National Land Realty. Aaron comes to us from Nebraska. And for those of you that don't know the name, we're talking about an individual that if you crack open the 1994 edition of Sports Illustrated for the National Championship Nebraska Cornhuskers, you will find this man standing there on the cover as a champion and the captain of that team, who went on to be an offensive lineman for the Tennessee Titans and Oakland Raiders. He is now president of National Land Realty. And Aaron, just tell me a little bit, you're one of the founding members. Tell me a little bit how you arrived and sort of, you went through the Cabela's route. Just give us a brief sort of, how did you get here?
Yeah. So, got into the land business right after I retired from the NFL and found a guy in western part of Nebraska by the name of Mike Lashley, who was a recreational land broker, and was visiting with him about a piece of property I was looking to buy on the Platte River, and was fascinated by his career. And he basically encouraged me to get with him when I was done playing. And I had a real estate license, obtained a real estate license while I was playing in the NFL. And I called him on the plane ride home when the Tennessee Titans doctor had pushed me to retirement, said, 11 knee surgeries, 31 years old, you played long enough, made some good money, go do something else. And I was excited for the next chapter, called up Mike Lashley, and he said, well, that when you talked to me, I'd just spoken with Jim Cabela, and they were interested in starting a real estate marketing branch of Cabela's world's foremost outfitters. And long story short, I became the first agent. Didn't even have a broker's license at that time, but I was the first agent that signed up with Cabela's. And we rode that train party for about 9 years. It was a wonderful experience. Got really well rooted, I'd say, in the land business, which I had zero experience. And that opportunity led me to along that path of creating my own brokerage, and built some pretty amazing technologies. And in March of 2015, met my business partner, Jason Walter, at a Realtors Land Institute conference. And it was, as he said, 1 + 1 = 3. If he's ever seen it, he had the data, I had the tech, and decided that day that we were going to merge our companies together. 9 months later, my company, Land Pros Realty, merged with National Land, and started combined with 40, 50 agents. And as you're well aware, we've grown it to over 496 offices and, 43 states. And it's been a wonderful ride. The land business has been very good to many of us.
And not just that, you got some fame brewing in the family as well. Your son is the rising country star Cooper James.
He is. He's doing really well. I'm not letting him get too much to his head. He's only 23, but he's making a go at it, and his mother and I support him 1,000%. And he's getting ready to make the move to Nashville, and he's a country music singer. And if you looked at him, you think he was a left tackle for some offensive for some professional football team. He's gigantic. He's like,
what is he, like 9 feet tall?
Yeah, he's like 6'6", probably 350, and is a big kid. But he can sing and he can play and he writes and he produces, and he's one of those talents that people are excited I think, to be able to potentially grab him and develop him and see where they can take him. So, yeah, we're excited. Cooper James, and you can find him on all of the streaming musics and what is it, Apple
Spotify
Music,
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I've heard it. I dig his music quite a bit. I follow his page too. But outside of this, all the successes you've had and starting this company, being one of the founders, we're here to talk about a bear hunt.
Are you sure you want to?
I absolutely. So this is a story. You told me this story when I first started at National Land, because you saw that I had a bear skull behind me on my Zoom, which I have now, and I finally got the bear rug.
Nice.
And I was all excited about doing a backcountry hunt, spot and stalking a bear, and then packing it down on my back, and I felt really awesome about that. And you started telling me about hunting bears in Siberia, and I felt like I had like a stuffed puppy behind me. It was one of those, like, my story is really not that cool. So when I was looking at like sort of how to grow stories with the podcast, and we've talked a lot about land, and I realized that hunting bear in Siberia is really not necessarily like a land topic, but it is outdoors, and it is, chances are, if you're going to enjoy something like a ranch, if you're going to enjoy something like a recreational hunting property, you're going to enjoy this story. So I wanted you to tell the story of your Siberian bear hunt, and I'm going to be along for the ride too.
Well, I love telling the story. It's one of those memories that will never escape me, because it was so much of the highs and lows and the craziness of just going to a foreign country. But, if I would have come home empty handed, it may have been a different story. But, one of the guys that I went with, just as a little side note, he said, I was really nervous about paying that much money to go over to Russia to shoot a bear. And he said, Aaron, I guarantee you that bear will make you $100,000. And the bear can make way more than that, in full disclosure, because it's like when I meet people and they're like, yeah, well, I shot a grizzly on Kodiak, and I'm like, it's a good starter hunt. Get dropped off in a helicopter that you feel like you're going to crash in, and then have them pick you up a couple weeks later and have no communication, and trying to communicate with a guide who doesn't speak English. And so, yeah, I mean, so, I'll tell you, go ahead.
How do you, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting around, I'm assuming you live in Nebraska at the time.
I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where does this come from? Where do you say, I want to fly to Russia and hunt a bear?
So I was part of a Jack Nicklaus golf course that got developed here in Nebraska called the Dismal River Club. And there was one guy in particular who was running it, and he was Jack Nicklaus's right-hand land guy, which was kind of unique, which I was kind of gravitating towards him, because this guy had done some really incredible, land deals throughout his career. And he had hunted. He didn't get married till, I believe, he was in maybe 40 years old or older. Literally sold real estate, was a financial advisor, really sharp guy, but would spend his time going on all these exotic hunting trips as a bachelor. And it, like I was just telling you, like I heard so many of them, and I was wired that way. But at the time, I'd already had 3 children, married, already been married for 10 years, I guess. And but it was exciting. It was exciting to think like that. And so he and I and one of the owners of the Dismal went to the Safari Club International show, and it was in Reno at that time. And amazing. If you haven't ever been to one of those, there's the SHOT Show, and then of course SCI. But it's just booth after booth of all these amazing places you can hunt and all kinds of guns and stuff. Well, there was a guy who was there representing hunts from Kamchatka, or Russia. And immediately my buddy Dick, the land guy, said, "Let's go." I'm like, "No, he's out of your mind." He goes, "Why not? Come on." He's not going to take no. And so he walks over and starts talking to the guy, and he's like, "Yeah, well, you can put in, it's a $2,500 deposit. I think if you get drawn, there's like 25 tags in the whole world that you get to go. And, if you don't hear from us in 3 years, we'll give your money back or whatever else." So he's like, "Come on, open up your pocketbook. Let's go do it." So sure enough, I come back from SCI and tell my wife that I put a deposit in on a bear hunting trip in Russia. I don't know if it doesn't sound
I was just
very
going to
like
ask about how this part went down. Like, is this one of those, like, you asked for forgiveness before you asked for permission kind of things?
So when I was at the latter part of my career in the NFL, it's a great question because, I'm climbing into bed and I'm telling my wife, because she's, everybody's just like, "Oh, you can play. Why didn't you play 15 years? I'm like, well, there's a reason why if you play 3 years, they give you all of the benefits, because it's really, really hard to play a long time in the NFL. And my last few years climbing into bed, I'm just telling you, I love the game. I don't know how long I can do this. I mean, ice bags on my knees, you name it. And it's a very, very tough line sport. But I said, and I also include and say, but I can tell you this, when I'm done playing, I'm going to go hunting, and I don't want to ask for permission. I'm going to support and be with it, but I'm going to do some stuff because it's in my, and I couldn't do it for
right.
I was a kid and I hunted all through it, hunted in the pros even, but nothing like I wanted to go to Alaska. I wanted to go all over and have these hunts. So she knew it. And so it was kind of part of the package deal. Like, I want to keep playing pro football, but I'm also going to if I have an opportunity, I'm going to go do this stuff. And so what happened was, I think that show was in January, and we got a call in March that said, "Congratulations, you were in like a group tag." So one of us got drawn. So all three of us were eligible to go. And I'm like, "What?"
Within 3 months.
This is and this was in March, and the hunt was in the middle part of April. So
this is just go.
Oh yeah. And I'm telling
do you even have boots at this point? Like,
I have nothing. I don't even have a caliber gun that I would feel comfortable shooting a 9-10 foot brown bear with. And so I told Dick, I'm like, "I don't know if I can do this. I might just forfeit my deposit." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you big weenie, you got to go." And keep in mind, I'm mid-30s, maybe. He's 60 something. And
you can't let the gray beard call you out like that.
You're not backing out now. And so I said, all right. So of course they wanted full payment immediately. I was like, "Well, how smart is this?" Right. So I'm booking a bear trip to Russia. And of course, the next thing is, we're online trying to find flights. Well, there's no flights. They shut them off from going. There were some that were going westerly from the U.S. to get over, maybe to Sydney or something crazy. But it's, like I always think of the Sarah Palin comment that she said, "You can see Russia from my backyard." I don't know if you remember that. Well, that's where we're going, right? It was it's like the Siberian Sea and the Bering Sea, I guess, and then the Siberian Strait, and then it goes down on the far easterly side of Russia, and it makes a peninsula very similar to Florida. And so it's only, as the crow flies, maybe 4 hours from Anchorage, or something like that by flight.
Right.
So we had to go all the way around the world, and it took 62 hours to get there. And
oh my God,
almost missed my flight. I missed my flight coming out of Omaha, got in my truck, woke up. I had my alarm set for 5 a.m. I woke up at like 6, and I'm like, I can't get there. Something. I booked a flight, changed my flight to Kansas City, drove 90 miles an hour to Kansas City, got on the flight and met my buddies in Atlanta. And I was a sweaty mess and just like freaking out. I had to check guns. I mean, it was crazy. So we get there. And so the flight path was originally going to be Omaha, Atlanta, Moscow, Petropavlos, 9.5 hour bus ride, then get a Sikorsky helicopter and drop you off. So
So part of the trip actually involved taking a helicopter into the middle of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. And before that, so what I like to tell, what I want people to know, because it's the experience, and unless you physically get to experience it and understand when people are talking about things like, Russia and such, I tell them this, look, the flight from Atlanta to Moscow was 12 and a half hours. The flight from Moscow to Petropavlovsk, same country, was 12 hours. We never flew off of Russia.
Because it's a big country.
It's gigantic. Like it's, you can go from New York to LA and back in that time period, right? So it's a gigantic country. So we go to Moscow and we get to, I got to tell us this. So we get to the baggage claim and there's nobody with us. So now we have to be able to get in through, what do you call it when you're checking in from a visiting country?
Customs.
Yeah, so to get in through their customs. And anyway, so the PH, the personal handler, this is what they call him, who is going to help you. He's not meeting us until we get to Petropavlovsk. So we're in Russia, and he sends us an email before we left, and he said, go to the baggage claim, and there will be a gentleman to meet you there. And so we went to the baggage claim and we're looking around. Swear to goodness, it looked like it was straight out of 1970. People were smoking in the airport. The old baggage claims clanking around. I'm like, are they going to put our guns out here? I mean, I don't know how this is going to work, And so we're looking around. We're like, well, nobody speaks English, nobody. And
right.
So we're looking around, and I see this guy in this leather brown coat, and he's looking at me, and he's smoking a cigarette. He's got a mustache. And he looks at me and I look at him, and the two guys I were with weren't paying attention. And he kind of gives me a head nod. And anyway, I walk over to him. He said, you hunt bear? And I said, yes. And then he says this, man, he says, follow me. Do not look at me. Do not make eye contact with me. Follow me. And turns around and walks off.
This sounds like a spy novel.
And this is what I'm saying. It's like the craziest thing, like the whole stories. And he turns and walks off. I go over to my two buddies and go, okay, that's our guy. He said, follow him. Do not look at him. Do not make eye contact with him, but follow him.
This is the part where you get stabbed, right? Like we're all walking somewhere to get stabbed right now.
You just don't know. I don't know how this works in Russia, So we got our bags and we did have our guns. We got our guns with us, and we are walking down this hallway, and he literally kind of does one of these, looks around and then dives into this door like this, opens it up, this side door. And we go in there, and I'm leading, and my two old buddies are sitting behind me, and I'm got my guns and I'm looking in this little hallway, this room that he goes into. And there's these two KGB looking dudes with a scanner in the room. That's it. Like a baggage scanner, like at the airport. And he walks up there and he's like, and they're looking at him like, what the hell are you doing in here? Like, get the hell out of here. And he's like, hey, and I'm like, oh, and he talked to him for at least 10, 15 minutes. And we're standing there in the hallway going, do. And finally I see him go, he kind of makes this gesture and he's going, he reaches in his wallet and he grabs his wallet out and he opens it up, and the guys fold their arms kind of like, okay, and they looked at him like, what do you got? So he grabs some rubles and he goes like this, and immediately turns to us and goes and is waving us to come in. So we're coming in. He said, put your guns on the scanner, put your bags in there, take out all your ammo and put it into one bag. And we're going, God, this is crazy. So anyway, they go through, they scan us, and we get through, and they push us straight to the front of the line in the Moscow airport, and we were flying business class for this next leg. And you could see one of the biggest memories was all the people, just like it looked like a regular airport, older, but this was Moscow. This wasn't like, like it's a huge airport. Everybody standing in line, single file, stoic. Nobody's saying a word. The line is probably 50, 75 people deep, and nobody's saying anything. And they're looking, you're just like, you could feel the presence of like the former communist, nation that they were part of. Nobody's getting out of line or whatever. And so they put us at the front, and here we are, and we're going. Okay. we go and we have to go through the security clearance again. And I get to the line to go through their scanners. Now, this scanner is like the whole thing is amazing. Looks state of the art, everything. And there's this big Russian lady, and she's telling people, blah, 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 and I could see there, she's telling them, take your shoes off, put them in, and you had to put on these booties. It had this blue light lit background, it was just like, it was kind of high tech looking stuff. Well, this guy in front of me, he doesn't speak English, but she's telling him, and he's telling her, she's telling him to take his shoes off. Well, he's like, he's looking, I'm like, dude, take your shoes off. And she tells him one more time. I had no idea what she was saying, but she was like, take your shoes off, and pointing at him. And he's like, blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, she's radioing. Blah, 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 blah. And here comes this big KGB looking dude. He comes over. He's like, hey, put your shoes in the conveyor. And Russian is screaming. I'm like, holy cow. And the guy's like panicking, putting it on. I was like,
running at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So we get on the next flight, and I'm like, oh, this is the first day through this whole process. And so we fly 12 hours to Petropavlovsk. We get off. We met all the other hunters from around the world who were there. We got onto a bus, and this bus was just.
Wait, is this okay? So this is before or after a helicopter?
This is before. So this is before.
So you were going chronologically. I'm like, man, we can't miss the helicopter flight because this sounds.
Oh yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. So we flew all the way across Russia, and we land in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, Russia. You can look it up, and we proceed to. They take us to a hotel. The rooms were like a jail cell. They knew. We learned very quickly that we're like, yes, we need 2 rooms. And they're like, you American? And they're like, yeah. Well, $130. And this, like, you wouldn't pay $50 for sure to sleep in this. And so we learned real quick, and there's
no plan B, so you got to pay.
The beds were 6 foot long. I'm 6'4", right? It was just whatever, we're like laughing, joking. Well, there was a casino across the street. 2 things. There was a Brunswick Bowl next door. You couldn't tell, everything was in Russian, but you could look at this building that was next to it and go, hey, that's a Brunswick bowling alley. And sure enough, we walk in there. Craziest part of it, we walk in there and all the lanes are full. Everybody's smoking. You can tell people are drinking. They don't drink beer. They drink vodka, right? But you go up to the concession stand. We're hungry. And I go up to the concession stand and everything's written in Russian. So you can't, no idea. I'm looking at whatever people, and I'm watching these kids go up there and get their food. They're getting like a bowl, little paper bowl that would be like tomatoes, olives, fruit, and maybe a piece of bread. And the next people come up and I'm like, there's no junk food. There's no crap. They don't get steak. They don't get anything. They're like, here's what you get. You get fruits and vegetables and a potato or whatever else. And it was just amazing watching how people and the men go to work to support the wife, and the wife is the one who is the public figure. And they all smoke, they all drink, but it's almost like this trade-off because they don't eat crap. They eat fish and they eat fruit and they eat green veggies. And that's
right.
So we went next door there because we had to stay there for a day and a half to be able to get to this. And then across the street was a casino that somebody told us in the hotel. Well, it looked like this, gray building, like a strip center. And of course, you couldn't read anything, but you would not guess that this is a casino. This is like a strip mall. And we walk in, and sure enough, there's these guys in tuxedos and a couple ladies, dressed up in casino attire because they were working there and nobody else is in there. So we go in and we start playing blackjack, having some fun, whatever. I leave. I'm like, I'm going to bed, long day, whatever. I know we got more coming up. And so they were having some fun. Well, I wake up the next morning and Dick says, I said, well, how'd it go? He said, well, Al walked out of there with 10 grand. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, at that point, the PH, everybody's going, you need to protect yourself. Because he literally went in and won $10,000, and so we're out of there. We get on the bus. All the other hunters across the world are going. Didn't know these parts and what we were going to do because it really wasn't communicated.
Are these all American hunters or are there language?
I don't believe there were any other American hunters. There was a couple guys from France, a couple guys from 2 or 3 from Canada. They were really from all over the world. Most of them spoke English.
I was going to say most of those would speak English on some level. Like France will speak English on some level. Canada definitely, obviously, but.
Yeah. So here we proceed to get in a bus and we start, driving out of Petropavlos. And of course, this is like 2007. So, your cell phone wasn't even an option and you couldn't really see what was going on around you because you'd love to have a Google map or something that kind of showed you.
You have actual map.
We drove 9.5 hours and by 30 minutes to an hour outside of Petropavlos, it was just like rock road. So, it would be the equivalent of like a charter bus, but it felt like it was probably 1970s and the seats were tiny and blah, blah, blah. So we drive
like basically a gravel road, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and when you call it, yeah. And the only thing you saw was Russian military equipment passing by. And so when people are like, I think the United States has, what are we close to? 375 million, something like that, maybe 350 million, I think now. And Russia is like 150, maybe not, they're not even 200 million. So it's half the population, 3 times the size of the country. And you either work for the government and you're part of the military or you're doing whatever. I don't even know. So all you saw a few cars, but you literally outside of our hotel in Petropavlos, you would see tanks, you would see all these, armored vehicles just constantly just going up and down the road. Like, what are they doing? Where are they going? And so that's the only thing we saw for night. We got to the top of this mountain, and just real quick about it, we stayed in a town. I couldn't tell you the name of the town, but it was built around a hot spring. And so there were probably, I'm going to guess, 500 people that lived in this village up in the mountains of Kamchatka. And we stayed with a husband and wife, and we had an interpreter with us. And I asked the interpreter, I was fascinated. They said, we're going to sit down for a meal in this house. And they would pump the heated water from the hot springs in pipes through their house. And that's how they kept it warm.
It's geothermic heat. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're, of course, they've been there for like 500 years, like it's crazy how long people have been in that area. But we stayed there and we sat around the table, and I asked, the interpreter said, I'm curious. I said, I want to ask the gentleman how old he is. And he said, I'm 70 in Russian. And I was like, no way. I mean, he didn't look a day over 55.
Oh, right? Okay. You don't know because, you get the hardworking societies, you age a little quicker, but yeah.
Yeah. And he looked incredible. And I'm telling you, the reason why is because they have their greenhouse in their backyard, which is very rare, right? But they don't have the community. There's more to that. But so they grew their own food. And I asked him, so what did he do for a living? And what does he do for a living? He said, the interpreter said he's retired. He used to be a coal miner. And I said, a coal miner. Okay. So I said, so what was that like? I mean, what was your day like? And he didn't really have much to say. I said, so did you have weekends off? And he looked at her when I asked it, and he's like, no, there's no weekends off. No, it's like, because I was asking a question like, I just was curious. And he's like, no, there weren't days off. Like we worked every day. And he was like, it sounded like 7 to 7. And that is why when people came home, all they did was drink vodka, smoke cigarettes, and that was the next what they got up for every day. I'm like, here I am. I'm inquisitive. I want to know this stuff because here you are in an opportunity. Like, what's it like in another country? They live in this paradise up in the mountains, right? But it's like, yeah, no, we don't get that privilege that you guys do.
Yeah, we're spoiled. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next morning we load up on a helicopter. I have no idea how old it was. I would guess probably at least 30, if not 40 years old.
There's a hand crank up front that you got to get the engine going and everything.
Mm-hmm. And so we jump in and we're sitting kind of on the exterior of the cab, if you will. So our backs are to the windows, right? And there's probably 12 of us on this helicopter.
I was just going to ask how many were on it. So this is a large helicopter.
Right. So the guy at this point was a younger guy, say mid to late 20s, and he spoke very good English. And he was kind of the lead saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're going to load up here. When they start the engines, we are going to be moving quickly. And he was helping us because they don't talk much about this, but he was basically saying it's very, very expensive to get fuel here. So there's not going to be any messing around, and we're going to do it. So we get in, they start the motors, we got earplugs in, and the guy I'm telling you about who was talking to us was standing with his back to the two pilots. And he goes, okay, we good? Okay. And he turns around and he puts his hands on both the pilot's shoulders and says, let's go. And he turned around and we're up in the air. And so instantly we're up, and then there's no FAA, there's none of that stuff. So this helicopter, to maximize fuel capacity, was just skimming the mountains, just going everywhere he could to stop from getting too high. I don't know all the reasons. So we're going about an hour now. Okay.
You're in a video game at this point, dodging mountains and trees.
I'm just like, for the last 3 days, my mind is blown everywhere. And so now we're an hour in, and the helicopter starts tilting and starts circling. And you can look out but you couldn't really talk to each other because it was so loud. And I'm looking, you could see there was a dome tent down there, and it was pretty heavily timbered, and there were snow machine trails or tracks that were around there. And anyway, he circled around. What he was looking for was a landing spot. So when he circled and he came and he landed, as soon as he started to come down, that guy said, he goes, get ready, you. And it wasn't us, it was the other guys. Get ready to go. They knew exactly where their bags were. The door came open. They took their gear. They threw it out the door and like literally shoveling the guys. Go, 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 go. As soon as the last guy hit, thing comes up, boom, we're back in the air. I'm going, holy crap. Like, are we next or what are we doing? Like, so they drop off 3 different groups, right? And we're the last group. And I remember them circling around. I'm going, hey, well, we got a little log cabin down there. So, I mean, like a little log shack, and there were 2 dome tents and a lot more sparse. We were up higher in the mountains. Well, come to find out, we landed at about, I don't know, 10,000 feet. I mean, it was something crazy, but you probably shouldn't be.
You're up there.
That high. I don't know enough about that. But so they drop us off, and I'll never forget, they threw our stuff out, got our stuff. There's some couple of, people, guides and stuff that were standing by the cabin, don't speak English. And then we had the interpreter with us though for that part of our trip, which was nice. And the helicopter takes off, and I videoed virtually everything that I've told you so far. Every part of it, I can show you like a video. And Dick turns to me and goes, well, there's no turning back now. I'm like, oh. And when the helicopter left, I'm like, holy crap, we were literally in the middle of Russia by Siberia, and like, we're here. We're not going anywhere.
Nobody knows where the body is.
No. So we get in, and there's a lot of kind of fun stuff I can I'll skip, but meeting the guides, they were young. They were, I should say 2 of them were probably about 30. Real Russian bear hunting men. And there was a guide, native, who was probably 70. And there was a cook who was probably 25, 30 years old, little guy. And there was another helper that was there. And so, we sat down, and the interpreter helped us for a little bit, but we went back into the cabin, and it's small little cabin. And this guy who, his name was Alexia, like every third person's name was Alexia, and Alexei, however they say it. And anyway, he said, you vodka? And I was like, what? And I said, you vodka? I said, vodka? And he said, vodka. And I was like, vodka? He goes, no, vodka. And I was like, yeah. And he's going, yes, vodka. And I said, yeah, sure. We'll have, we're in Russian bear camp. So we looked at our buddies, and they turn around and they go through this. He looked at all 3 of his buddies, those guys, and they kind of, like looking at us like, they're going to drink the Russian vodka. And so I didn't know what we were getting into. And so he goes in, he reaches under the table, and he grabs this bottle. And first of all, he grabs this tray, and the tray has olives and lemons or oranges and these fruits and stuff on it. And everything's ceremonial, right? He's taking his time. Then he takes these little shot glasses, and then he proceeds to pour. I'm like going, all right, so this
it's on.
And then he's like, and I go to drink it, I raise it up, and I'm like, no. He's like, He looks at his buddy. He's like, and he starts toasting. We toast for like 5 minutes, and they're saying something, whatever. And then he looks at me. He's like, gives me the okay. So I'm like, all right. So we turn it up, and then they looked at me, and they just started going, like laughing and looking at me like, what did you know what you just drank? Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane, right? By the way, he poured that out of almost like a 2-liter water bottle. Like it wasn't in a bottle. And so
you just drink a shot of gasoline.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is definitely like home fermented. Like, what are they doing? Going to the Russia vodka grocery store up there? I mean, and so that was our first night. We get up the next day, slept in these Russian dome tents with a little barrel heater that was, a third of a barrel, and it was awesome. Slept on a stick bed with caribou hides on it, and it's great. I mean, honestly, I was like, that's seriously like our cot thing. Like it was like little bitty tiny sticks all placed together up off the ground, and that's what you slept on. So we get up the next day and get dressed, and so I guess we're going bear hunting right here. Jump on. He's got his Russian snow machine, and it's got this handmade sled that he's pulling behind this thing. But his snow machine's at least 30 years old, right? And
so this is like a 1970s model snowmobile.
Yeah, you would totally go, that's a Russian snowmobile,
right?
And so we start going, and I'm like, I'm literally sitting in this. They had like an old like Jeep seat was the only thing that was not a real natural part, if you will. Everything else was sticks and whatever else.
So are you sitting on the sled, or are you sitting behind?
I'm in the sled.
You're like in a Red Rider wagon behind the
parka on. Yeah, oh yeah. I got the parka on. I got, I got the goggles, and you're literally riding in there, and
you're just cargo.
I'm just like, okay, here we go. So we were less than a mile from camp, and he's driving this snow machine, and I'm sitting there back there going, man, this is just so cool watching, looking around, and I don't know what you're going to see. I'm like, is this bear area here? What, because there's no communication. Anyway, we're driving around. He makes this turn. We're going through the trees. And next thing you know, I feel the sled kind of like start almost wanting to flip, right? So I'm like, well, crap, man, am I supposed to like be balancing here? So he makes a turn the other way. And the next thing I go, boom, here I am. I'm off the sled. And I'm in like at least thigh deep snow. And I remember going, oh man, geez, wow, I guess, okay, so whatever. And he turns around, he stops the sled, and he stands up, and he turns around, and he looks at me, and he gives me this, waves with his finger like, come on, big guy, hurry up.
Come on, silly American, walk back over here.
I'm like, all right, homie, let's see. You ain't going to tell me that again, right? Because I can just tell. He's like, if you're going to fall off the sled, whatever. I'm like, well, I didn't know you were like going to be making hairpin turns, going through this stuff. So now I'm like, I'm not falling off again, right? So I would say on day one, I fell off at least 12 times. Okay, and now it's on after the second one. You're like, okay, the third one, I'm not like this is getting.
I just want to like illustrate. You got how tall are you? 6'4"?
6'4".
A 6'4", 300-pound plus ex-NFL lineman riding behind a 1970s snowmobile like a Red Rider wagon.
Yeah, get pulled on.
Trying to stay on board.
Yeah, and so. We go, and the sun, because it's just like Alaska, the days were very long. The nights were short. The sun was hot. The sun was, light was visible, I should say, till at least 10:30 at night. And we went from that morning and got back at probably 9-10 p.m. Maybe a little earlier that day, 8 o'clock or so. So we were hunting, and I'm on the, I don't know how many, if I was guessing, I'd say we covered probably 40 to 50 miles. Okay.
Is this all like road? Like, so when you say hunting in thigh deep snow, you're not out like hiking around. You're just riding around in the snowmobile, hoping this guy sees something. We were spotting. And of course, that first day, we didn't even do much of it. He was just looking. I mean, it was more like we're on this, I'm just getting towed around this sled up in the mountains. Okay. Now you being a skier, you can totally relate to this. Okay. So we got above the timberline. Okay. And there was a time on the second day where we were going along, and I would say we're probably 11,000 feet.
Okay. And 11, maybe even more than that. In some cases, we were even way higher. But we're going along, and I see him looking down where I could tell he's trying to get somewhere to the other side of the mountain, something. But there's no trails. This isn't Colorado skiing, whatever. It's like you're making your own path. And he's looking, and he keeps looking, down. I'm like, well, why is he looking down? I'm sitting there just worried about holding on and not getting thrown off. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in 2 days, I see that he hits the brake light, and he turns. And we're going straight down, nothing less than a black diamond ski slope. Okay. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, we're next thing you know, we go from 0 to 30 plus miles an hour. And
this is how I die in Russia.
So I see him. He's got the brakelet hit, and you have to balance. His snow machine is one of those, when he had to turn left, he would put both feet on one side and flip his feet onto the other side to turn the other way. And I see him, he stands up, he turns, lets go of the handlebars, turns around, looks at me, and jumps off. And so I look at him, and as soon as he did that, because you're full senses now, like we're not in control right here. He jumps, I turn around, boom, land straight on him. I look down, the snowmobile machine is doing cartwheels with the sled.
He ran the snowmobile off a mountainside.
Yes. Okay. So now the next thing I know, we were in powdery snow, whatever, and I'm doing the system check. I'm like, okay, I'm good. And all I hear is this, oh, and I'm going, oh no. And I look, and he's grabbing his wrist, and I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, he's just, mad, whatever else. And he keeps grabbing his wrist. I'm like, oh, great. Now, if he can't drive this, plus, first of all, I don't know how the hell, and I swear we are 30 miles from camp. Okay. And we get down there.
You got to go hop on the phone, right?
Yeah, just good. Yeah, exactly. No, there was no phone. There was nothing. It was like the whole time after this event, it was kind of like I never lost my bearings, because going up in a mountain, timber, whatever, like I had to know what way was approximately back.
You can pinpoint mountain peaks, and you can coordinate yourself
over there.
Yeah,
so I have to walk. That's one of it. So anyway. He gets up, and he starts walking down the mountain. He's grabbing his wrist, and we get up to the snow machine, and it's literally upside down, and it's T-bone. And he looks at me, and goes, he's like, lift. I go, hell yeah, you lifted. We're lifting. We're gonna, and we go over, and we start to lift the snow machine, and I'm like, well, we got to get this thing over. So I'm doing full, ex-NFL deadlift on this thing, and it ain't budging. And he's standing right, and he's pulling too. And I hear him go, and he starts, and next thing you know, we start getting it tilted. Finally, I'm like, as soon as we got it moving, I couldn't let it come back down. We get it pushed over. And so he straightens up the sled, whatever. The windshield gone, hood gone, all disintegrated. And he starts pulling on the pull. There's no electric starter. It's a pull,
Yeah.
And every time he pulls it, he's like, pulls it and won't start, and he pulls it probably 14, 15 times. And on about the 15th, 16th time, it goes, and I'm like, oh God, please, and the next he pulled one more time, and one more time was on. He looked at me and just gave me the get on, and I'm like, holy crap. We get back to camp, okay, at like 10 o'clock. And we get there, and now Dick was like, how was your day? I said, well, I bet it wasn't as eventful as mine. He goes, I bet it was. He's like, how many times did you get thrown off the sled? I said, at least 12. He goes, I guarantee it was more for me. And anyway, Al, our other buddy, who's older than Dick, is he's not as good a shape, but he had the 7-year-old guy with him. And he was laughing at us, literally like, my guy got off the sled and helped me get across all these things. And I'm like, I thought my guy was there literally trying to kill me, right? And so we had this meeting that night, and Dick, in his way that he is, the interpreter was there, and he's like, we need to make it clear we didn't come here to get killed. We came here to shoot a bear, and the driving blah, blah, blah is ridiculous, and we need to do something about it. And they're like, all right, whatever, their responses. And Al's just laughing. Okay, long story short from this part is so now we're in it. We're in Siberia. We're doing all this, but we are I don't know how excited I am about going tomorrow. Like, he almost died the first 2 days. And so we get back.
Well, and I was going to ask too. So you mentioned the elevation. It's not like they prepped you guys to go at elevation beforehand. Like, you're all at risk for elevation sickness, possible edema, right? Like, that's all real risks.
There's not going to be any medicine. They're going to be pulling like
you're just going to die.
Yeah, exactly. And so we get back on the third day, and Al is not there. Like, now it's like I got in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and it's 10:30. Al's not there. Al's not back. Okay. So Alan was going across a wooden bridge, which we crossed several times. My guy just went floor over this thing. Like, they built out of the same thing my bed was made out of, the cot. They built a bridge across one of the streams, and they were going over the bridge, and the bridge broke, and Al flew off, and the guys kept shovels in the back of their snowmobiles because that's when you dig yourself out. Flew off, hits his ribs on the shovel, and is laying in the river. So his 70-year-old guide literally saves his life, gets him back. Al gets back to camp, broken ribs. Okay. And now we're like, oh man, like, this is, so Al was laughing at us because your guides are so, you're like, my guide's awesome, whatever. So I had to tell you all that because it's not just what I was able to do. It's how the story ends. So day 4 it was or so, we go out and we're looking, and the bears are coming out of hibernation. So when you get to the top of the mountain, there's a picture maybe I can send to you that you can see. It was a moment when my guide got off and he's sitting on the edge of this mountain. We are above the timberline, I'd say at least 13,000 feet. And he's sitting on the edge and he's glassing and he's looking. And I was like, this is a Kodak moment if I've ever seen one. I take a picture. Well, I get up next to him, I grab my binos and I'm looking, and he's pointing, goes, "Good bear." It's the first thing, only thing he said. And I'm looking, I go, "Yeah, that looks pretty good." And we're watching him, and he's going up the mountain and down the mountain. Like, amazing, just watching, he's probably, I don't know how far, long ways, but you can see him. And he keeps going up and down and getting deeper into the ravine. And he looks at me, he's like, gives me the gun signal, and I grab my gun and we start walking down. So we walk down, and we're about a half mile down the mountain. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, that's a long ways back up to the.
You got to go up the other direction. So what you're describing too is exactly the same process that I've gone through for hunting black bear for a spot and stock. Like, you go in the spring, you wait till they're coming out of hibernation, and you sit on one ridge and you're watching the next ridge. And then you got to evaluate sort of like, okay, what's my return on investment here? Am I going to walk 1,000 feet down and 1,000 feet back? How is this going to go?
It only gets better. Trust me. Yeah. So now we're watching and we're stopping and we're looking, and we see the bear keeps moving down the ravine, and he keeps going up, and he's just searching something. He's going up and he's going down, and we keep on. So now we're about a mile downhill from the snow machine, and we're walking through this kind of dense, they weren't real tall pines. I don't know how to describe them. They were more like Austrian pine looking things, like maybe 20 foot tall, but bushier. And he turns to me and he goes, "Okay, shoot." And it's the second words of English I heard him say. And I'm like, "Shoot." I'm like, and I got my gun. I'm like, and at this point, I'm like, I wasn't even thinking we were going to see. And I turn and look, and the bear is running straight up the hill at us. Okay. And I'm literally like, there's trees, and you can hear him and you can see him running. Okay. Well, what I didn't know, it was the flight or fight instinct, but he didn't know. He just knew that he was either attacking or running, and he comes running and he turns and he's about 50 yards from me going sideways. And I don't know if he's getting ready to turn to come right up at us, and I shoot. So the next thing I know, I'm like, the action, all the excitement of being able to get there. And I didn't even need to look because I knew we were glassing, and I knew he was at least a 9-footer. And I'm looking, I shoot. And the next thing you know, I see the bear turn, and my guide starts running down the mountain. The bear's going straight downhill, and he's running down. Next thing you know, he's got his gun with him, this old Russian AK that he carried with him. The barrel was like bent. I noticed it one day. He's going pew 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 pew, and I'm like, well, what the hell? This guy's shooting at my bear now. And they did tell us, they're like, if you shoot one, that's it. You don't get to go for another one. So he shoots, and I remember he's still moving. At this point, I kick it into full gear, and I'm literally doing the bouncing down the mountain. And I see my guide, and I get in front of him, and I look, and I can see the bear going down the ravine, and now he's coming up. Okay, and I literally put my gun on a tree branch, and I'm looking, and I'm going, dang, this is a long way. This is a long way, and I put it on the top. He's going up the mountain, and I put it on the back of his head, the crosshairs, and I shoot, and boom, you could hear him let out this roar like, rah, and he turns over, and he's on the ground, he's flopping. And my guy, third words of English, good shot, 300 meter. And I'm like, well, dang, that's pretty amazing. I don't know how the hell we're going to get this thing, but I shot him, right? So we're standing there, and we're completely out of breath. I mean, just, very hard.
You're running through snow. I mean, this is some of the hardest physical activities you can do, running down a hill in snow.
So we're laying there, and we're looking, I'm sitting there watching, I'm still seeing him, and we're starting to walk a little bit, and he turns to me and he goes, shoot again. And I look, and the bear is back up on his feet, and he's going up the mountain. I'm going, oh my gosh. I ran down a little bit more because there was some room to be able to gain an advantage. He's going uphill, and I gained some advantage. I put him in the crosshairs again, and he is going up the mountain. And I'm like going, this is farther than the first one. So they always tell you, and this is a hunter, you don't ever want to put the crosshairs off the animal. Okay, because that's just an unfair shot. It's, you're not even. Yeah. Not very good. I put it above his head because I'm like, this is longer than that one. And I shoot, boom, and he rolls again. Okay. And my guide turns to me and he goes, good shot, 400 meter. I literally 375 H&H, right? Yeah. Now this like you're like, man, might as well we can get. And the bear is still rolling. He turns around and he grabs a tree branch up above him to try to pull himself up, and he dies with his paw hooked to the tree branch. And he's just he's standing there like this, amazing. So now we're like, okay, we walked down. Took us at least an hour and a half I got to a place where
you're putting up serious distance from your snowmobile at this point to get something to weigh.
Like the snow machine is the furthest thing. Like I'm getting to the bear. I'm not sure what's going to happen then. And we get up to him, and it took us an hour and a half to cross that ravine and to walk up there. And I could take no more than maybe 3 steps and have to stop to catch your breath. I mean, it was every time you take a step, you just sink all the way down to your waist, and you're trying to pull your snowshoes, anything. And we get up there. Keep in mind, I have my backpack. I have everything at the snow machine. Okay. I have my gun. He has his gun. We have nothing else. He does have his knife on him. So we proceed to get to the bear, and immediately we start skinning him. Right. And we're skinning him. And then the craziest thing is like for hunters that you can appreciate, because my father-in-law of all people asked me, he said, when you skinned him, did he look like a human? And I was like, yes.
Bears are terrifying like that. Yes, it does.
And really big ones, like 800 pounders, you should see what, they're, and he's laying there on his back and all the skin is off. And I'm looking
at messes with you a little bit. It's a hard thing to do. Yes.
Gigantic triceps. His chest is huge. He's got abs. He's got these little bitty short legs, not very much, but his upper body looked just like the Incredible Hulk, right? So we're done. Covered in blood. He took the time. He cut out the gallbladder. He cut out, because they sell that to the Chinese Chinese market, black for medicinal purposes. And he took all the stomach fat, because the stomach fat from bears is their remedy to the flu. So they boil it down. So he had 2 plastic bags with it, and he had this bag of bear fat and like the gallbladder. I don't know if there was anything else that he took.
And you can render it for cooking oil too. It's really, really good cooking oil.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then after all this, he turns to me and he goes, he turns to me and he looks at the snow machine and he just walks off. I'm like, hey, Lexi. I said, no, boom. I had three shells in my gun. I don't have any ammo. I have nothing. And I was like, no more bang bang. And he looks at me like, you big wimp. He goes over, grabs some bark off this pine tree, and he grabs it inside of his coat, and he grabs a book of matches, and he lights the match, and he lights that, and he grabs a stick, and he puts the stick on top of that little fire. This is on top of the snow, and walks off. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, okay, well, I know this. That fire is not going out, right? And he put it right next to a tree that was leaning, big tree. And I'm literally thinking to myself, okay, first of all, remember, like waist deep snow, I've got to get wood to keep this fire alive, because I guarantee you he's not going to be back here for hours. There's just no way.
So he's going back to get the snowmobile.
He's going back.
You're at the bottom of a ravine, like a mile below the snowmobile, probably 30 miles from your camp in the middle of Siberia.
I would say we're probably a mile and a quarter to a mile and a half from the snow machine, but you have to go back down the mountain and back up the mountain all the way to get there in, say, 25 degrees, and there's clouds forming.
So this is not the bottom of the ravine. This is bottom and up. You're shooting. Yes. So when you shot across the ravine.
Correct.
So exactly. Doubling your distance across.
And we had to cross the ravine to get it. And I'm like, I don't know how he's going to get the snow machine over here, right? I mean,
how good a physical shape was this guy in? Is this guy like?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
is he like a monster?
If I was to say, this is a real Russian bear hunter, that should be like self-explanatory. He was a bad dude. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't very big. But there's a picture too I have of, it had to have been like 30 degrees one day. We're driving around the snow machine, and I looked at his face is just like beet red, like how cold it was. And he didn't have any gloves on. I'm like, how do you even do that? Like, he didn't have his gloves on driving the snow machine. It's like freezing. I mean, so anyway, he leaves, and for the next 6 hours, I don't sit down. I'm just trying to collect, no saw, no nothing. I mean, I'm trying every ounce of energy I can. I'm finding the biggest branches, trying to get up trees, pull down stuff, and like keep the fire. The fire had burned a hole, and I have a picture of this that was about almost 4 feet deep, where the ashes and stuff were going. But I'm like, and the whole time I'm thinking to myself, we had seen bears everywhere, right? And there's more. Like the first day,
and you're next to okay. So how many pounds do you think this bear was that you got?
I don't even know. I would say between 600 and 800. I mean, it's huge.
So you're sitting next to potentially 800 pounds of meat in bear country.
Yeah, and no gun, no water, no nothing, nothing. And like it could start snowing, and I'm in complete survival mode. And so I literally had gone and grabbed the biggest sticks that I had, and I was figuring out if I could climb up the one tree that was laying down. I'm like, if he comes, he's coming after me. I've got at least 2 big clubs, and like how I was going to defend myself. And then the other thing is the hide from the bear was there, and I pulled it closer to me towards the fire and built a step down into the fire where it had burned a hole, so that I could get close to the fire and cover myself with the bear hide, right?
Freshly cut off, right? So this is not like
covered in blood.
This isn't like a blanket.
I'm covered in blood.
Yeah.
And there's a dead bear, and like there's bears everywhere. The most bears in any part of the world are in Kamchatka. And so about 6 hours later, and thank goodness, this was maybe, I would say, noonish for the day. So we were out early, and this was one of this thing was the first bear we saw that day, maybe. And about 6 hours later, I hear the snow machine, and it's on the other side of the mountain.
It's been 6 hours.
6 hours, and no water. And I'm literally trying to every survival skill. Now I'm slowing heart rate. I'm just thinking, this is really getting a spot. So I hear him, and sure enough, he comes around the other side of the mountain and comes in, and he comes up to me. And he's like, he's all excited. He had food and water, and I'm sitting there going, where is it? Like, give me some water, after all that sweated and, you name it. And anyway, we get back to camp that night, and I asked the interpreter, I said, what was Alexei trying to tell me when he got to the sled? He said he got to the sled, and there was a group standing around him. And he said that they thought the gods had dropped the sled into the mountains. This is what I'm saying. This is like in the Amazon where there's people that we don't know. Like there are Russian, natives that live in the woods that they don't even see people. They don't even they don't have any, they're wandering around. And so I tell you, going for hours with we eventually got to meet up with them later, and I ended up buying one of a pair of mucklucks, their boots, off the guy, handmade out of seal and some other stuff. And
so I just had to look this up. The indigenous. So you said Inuit because it's the closest Alaskan tribe.
Yeah, right.
It's the Udage. Is it Inuit people? Is it because that's is it? Because I was just looking it up, and it's.
So and if that's not the right term, just the native, no different than the Alaska Eskimos.
Right. Well, because I don't want to mess it all up because I want to be aware with it. But there's 50 groups. I couldn't possibly pick one out.
So you have to look in the Kamchatka, Siberia area of what the
Kamchatka
native.
is Chukchi.
Yeah.
Chukchi.
I'm talking full blown wearing the caribou coats,
wearing fur.
And the most part was I literally the thing that was crazy was the guide when we met up with him, we found him, and the interpreter said he'd like to know how much for your mukluks because they spoke a version of Russian, right? And he gave her that, I don't know, what do you got to trade? And she said, is a lady interpreter, and she said, we'll give him $50. So I've reached in my wallet, it's 50 American dollars. Maybe it was rubles, I don't remember, but it was the equivalent of $50. And he takes his boots off, no socks on, nothing. Like he's walking around the snow.
Just gave you the boots.
Handmade boots. He did have another pair, and they were amazing. And unfortunately, I lost them in my house fire.
Oh, jeez. Terrible.
And also he had a handmade drill that he made out of one piece of wood that had a leather strap, and you pulled it, and it was it's great. Anyway, so we get back and kind of wrapping it up with the hunting aspect. We get back. I'm excited. And by the way, he's dragging me back. And I have this on film as well. I'm getting drugged back. I'm taking pictures of this bear riding between my legs on the snow machine. Right, so his head.
Did you cut
the bear skull?
The meat up the skull. Okay, so the meat was. So you took the fur, the head, and that kind of stuff.
And he took the meat for the dogs, and he also took the paws. And the paws is their delicacy. So, and we had those bear paw, fried bear paw.
And do they have, is trichinosis a thing up there? Because it's usually related to.
Yes, it is. And that's why the humans don't eat that bear meat. The dogs can, but they can eat the paws. And I don't know why, And so we get back and excited. Oh, and on the way anyway, I've got the video camera going, and the snow machine, the sled falls off of the snow machine. Okay. And I'm looking, and I'm like, well, he just keeps going. And anyway, he was gone. He went at least a mile before he realized I wasn't even behind anymore. So I had my video camera going, well, so I shot my bear, but the sled came off, and my guide hasn't realized it yet. So I'm hoping he comes back, and he came back obviously and got me. And so Al, who broke his ribs, is on day 9. Dick shot a bear 10'2" on day 6, and Al he couldn't. He was miserable, and I brought one pain pill with me that I was like, hey, and I only had one pain pill that was. I was like, hey, you never know. Because he couldn't bring, he brought a suitcase. That's it, right?
Right.
There's a ton of stuff. I was like, in case if something did happen, and I just happened to have it. And he had one pain pill, and we had some vodka and whatever else. And he didn't move for 6 days.
Oh my gosh.
I see him he's in the morning, he's getting up and he's trying to get his clothes on. I'm like, Al, what are you doing? He's like, well, you can't kill him in camp. I'm like, are you serious? And so he goes and lays down in the sled, and he drives around for a little bit. Well, Dick, the other guy I was with, is with his guy. He's going out to shoot a second bear. So so you can pay another $5 or $10,000, you can go kill two. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
He's out looking, and he comes hauling back. You can hear them screaming. He's going, ow, ow, ow. And Dick comes back to the camp. He goes, there is a 10-foot bear who jumped up in a tree right down here from camp. Get in the sled, and they get out in the sled, and they get him down there, pull right up 100 yards. And the bear's not going to, those big brown bears don't typically climb, but they spooked him, and he's up in the tree. And
right.
He's not very high. He's like 10 feet up in the tree. And they get his gun out and puts it on him, and Al shoots him in the foot. And the bear literally and they're like, oh gosh, chamber it again. Shoots him, right? The number 14 all time in Russia.
What?
10'6", I think.
And this is the old boy that broke his ribs, hobbling around camp, doesn't think he's gonna hunt.
And he shoots the number 14 all time.
Oh my gosh.
And so I guess, I could go on, but it's getting out was just as crazy as getting in. Did
you have to take the chopper out with the bear? And
oh yeah,
this just all sounds terrifying.
It's like I said, if somebody asked me if I'd do it again, the answer is probably yes. I'd probably want to do it again. Would I encourage someone else to go do it? No. I'm like,
I would never put my reputation on the line for something like that. Yeah.
And what's crazy is, Ronnie Richardson, our CEO, when I met Ronnie, the first question he asked me, he said, I heard you like to hunt. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, what do you like to do? He said, well, I went to Russia. I told him, I went to Russia. One of the craziest one, I went to, shot a brown bear over there. He said, where at? Kamchatka? I said, yeah. How'd you know that? He said, I've been there 12 times.
What?
So that Ronnie and I hit it off. I'm like, no way. Stayed at the same hotel, knows the casino, knows everything. Ronnie has been there 12 times. So pretty amazing. So yeah,
which is why next up is Ronnie's stories, right?
Oh yeah. And Ronnie's got some great, Ronnie has hunted way more than I have, but so that's Russian, bear hunting. I got back to, people always ask, well, how did you get him home? We had these dry bags. And so they boiled the skull, and then they wrapped the cape. They didn't really do anything to the cape. They wrapped it around the skull and stuffed it in one of the dry bags and checked it through like luggage.
And you're just going to hope it doesn't go bad by the time you get home.
Got to the back to the States, and they opened it up and they looked at to ensure it was there. And we had to have your, what do they call them? CITES permits or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another cool thing that was crazy that you just didn't even know existed, but we were going down on the flight from Moscow to Petropavlovsk. There was this famous American hunter guy who I did not know. He's like on a channel that I don't really watch. But he was going over to Petropavlovsk to shoot a capercaillie. And a capercaillie is a mix between a pheasant and a turkey. Well, we got to see those in the wild. One day we're on the snow machine, and you hear this. It sounded like a pheasant, but it was a much deeper thing. And he looks, and it's trying to fly like a pheasant, but it's as big as a turkey. And they were black, and all kinds of crazy animals. And
it's like a Harry Potter land.
Yeah. But the vastness of Russia, right? And to sit here and go, why do they have so much money? It's because they have so much border, and they've got all this oil and gas, and they've got all of these amazing minerals, and And I'd say the last cool thing, the most memorable thing, just in regards to the people, that has to do with land, which I think is kind of interesting, is nobody owns anything, right? So that's where it gets crazy. In Moscow, the very first thing I saw were these gigantic compounds, and they look like dormitories. Remember, there's like 14, 15 million people, something like that in Moscow, 12, somewhere in there, a lot. And you're looking, and it looked like all the buildings were on fire. There was smoke coming out of the windows. And I asked the interpreter, I was like, why do they all look like they're on fire? And she said, oh, the government turned the electricity off. And so you're like, what? So when it gets they turn it off. And so you're responsible for staying warm yourself. So they had these aluminum foil kind of chimneys coming out of each one of their apartments from this dormitory. And this dormitory probably had 1,000+ people that lived in it. And they're all trying to stay warm inside, their building. So what the government did at some point, I was really deep in understanding, because I think it's really something that could be utilized here in the United States in some capacity, is you didn't own anything, but they gave everybody a 1/4 acre of land. And on that 1/4 acre land is where you grew your vegetables and where you could have animals, you could raise chickens. And so you would go to and they call them Dutchess, I think is how you say it. And you go to your 1/4 acre of land, and that's where you can grow your food. And that's with every single citizen in Russia. So, they have all these potato farms. It doesn't look anything like this because it's all run by the government. And, it's like I said, I think the moral of the story is people need to get out of the country if they have, it's like, I think about the younger generations too, just going, you have any question, like you're in the greatest country on the face of the planet, so wonderful experience. And, yeah, Russian bear hunting.
Aaron Graham's Siberian bear hunt. Man, it's always great talking to you. I appreciate you telling this story. This is awesome.
Well, thanks for letting me tell it. I enjoy it.
This concludes episode number 43 for the National Land Realty Podcast, talking with Aaron Graham about the Siberian bear hunting trip of a lifetime. You can hear more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.